evening and welcome back to another episode of our The Wasted Hour podcast. This is Martin, and for this episode I met with electronic DJ and producer Nathan Micay at his apartment in Berlin. We talked about his beginnings and playing support for Skrillex, not drinking alcohol, doing sports, living a healthy lifestyle and being a personal trainer for his DJ colleagues, him moving to Berlin after getting the offer to play at Panorama bar, and of course his latest releases. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy. Thank you, Nathan, today for taking the time to talk about different stuff. First of all, congratulations on your new release.
Thanks.
That came out last week. We just talked about because I asked you how the reaction was on your record. And you said it's hard to say how it was. So, but what was the most, perhaps a direct message that stood really out, or something that you think about when you?
I got a lot of interesting messages from different people around the world. I got an interesting one this past weekend from someone in Brazil that it stood out, I guess, because they had never heard of me, but then they said that they heard, I forget the DJ who played it, but they heard a DJ play one of the songs, and then they said they didn't realize it was from an album, and they listened to the full album, and then they just listened to the new release, and they said it just consumed their entire weekend. And I love that feeling, when you find an artist you like, and then you just explore their whole discography and everything about them for 3 full days.
Yeah.
So it weirds me out to think that people do that about me, but it's a feeling I understand.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool.
Yeah. It's funny because I think I had the same thing with you too. Because when I heard you play at Berghain, and then after that I was who was it? Who played there? And then I dived into it, and also in your full history of it, because you started producing a lot of years ago. But when do you remember when you fell in love with electronic music?
Yeah, I do. I was living in Israel in 2008, and that was the first time I heard dubstep, but the original sort of idea of it with Mala and Digital Mystics and all that. And then I didn't really know what it was. I'd heard it and I was like, what is this? And then I got back to Toronto, and my friend Andrew showed me that, and then he started to show me jungle. And for the first couple of years, I was really, really into that. And then I tried to make that music a few years later while I was at school, and it was really, really bad because there's so much sound design involved in that. And musically, I've understood chords and things like this and how to structure, but I couldn't figure out the technical part of it. And then once I started to hear the whole, I guess you could call it post-dubstep sound now, like Jack Green and James Blake, that music, it sounded simpler enough to me because it was all very much melodical and chords and harmonies, and that is something I can do. So I started to do that with very basic sounding synths, and it all started to click for me.
Okay.
And,
But did you learn a classic instrument because you said you couldn't know how to play a chord or something like that?
My parents made me do piano when I was a kid. I hated it.
Yeah.
And then I played viola for about 9 years.
Okay.
So I have a background in it, but it's always just sort of been natural. My mom always jokes about how I can just pick up an instrument and figure it out in 2 days. So I play a bunch of different instruments, but those are my two I had training, I guess.
Yeah. What's the best part that you learned from learning a classical instrument? What that you can use now?
I guess with viola, because it was in school, I did it from grades 5 to 11, and I just hated having to have the structure of it, but it was fun to also go off on my little tangents and do my own things. So I guess from that, the best thing was just learning that, music, there's two sides of it. There's the hardcore personal training part of it, and then the hardcore self-exploratory thing, which I like. With the piano, it was so long ago, I can't even remember. Yeah. It was the same thing, though. I remember having a teacher and just hating it, hating it.
And practicing it. I remember too, because I learned the piano too, and I played for 10 years, but it was just in the last year, before I moved town, I didn't have a piano anymore, that I figured out what I want to play. And it's not just here's your sheet of notes and you just play it and learn to practice it, but also that it's a form to express yourself. But it was way too late for me because it was the classic approach, how to learn it and structure and strengthen the fingers. And
I think the other thing too is with the classical instruments, at least in the way I was taught it, you could never deviate from what was played. So if you're doing like the Brandenburg concertos, like, you can't improvise on that.
Yeah.
And I always used to do that, and I'd get in trouble. And so with music, it's more fun to make your own music. And if I'm just making something, it's like no ending to how much you can. Well, obviously, you have to make things. So I think that those early days doing that, I could start to feel like a fire burning, that I wanted to not necessarily try to make music, but at least try to change the music that I was being told to play.
Yeah.
So that's probably a big lesson from that.
So you said that your mom always jokes about that you're learning an instrument in like a few days, but because like you said, you were in like Israel in 2008, and like 3 years later, you already had your like first releases out. So we had like a quick.
I guess. I mean, I was actually the other night listening to my first 2 releases I hadn't in years.
Yeah.
I was going through an old hard drive, and I mean, musically, I'm actually quite happy with them still. Like, obviously, they're very much tied to a time and place. But the mix downs are awful. Like, as I said, I didn't know it. But yeah, it's funny to listen to those, and I can remember where I was when I was making those and how long it had been. Like, I had made my first 2 EPs about 7 months after getting Ableton.
Oh, wow, yeah. That's
so it moved pretty quick, but they sound terrible. Like, I didn't have a clue what EQ was or compression or anything, and it took me a long time to figure that out. And now I feel like people say, like, oh, your mix downs are good, and I still think they're terrible, but I can recognize they're better than they were.
Yeah. But you were back in Toronto when you started producing, or was it like still?
Yeah, I was at university. I was at this place called Queen's University. It's in this city called Kingston between Montreal and Toronto.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did that for a while. I hated the university I was at. It was just a big party school, and I don't drink or anything.
Yeah.
And then I got back to Toronto, and that's where I really finished the first 2 EPs over one summer. I remember very clearly.
Yeah.
Summer of 2012.
Yeah, which for me is like 2012 is like 3 years ago, but no, it's 7 years ago.
I know, it's weird.
Time flies. But then I also read that you made like quite had like success with your like first releases because you also played support for Skrillex.
Yeah. So when I was 20, I was living in England doing an exchange for my 3rd year of university.
Yeah.
And somehow, I was on this agency called Main Stage Artists, and Skrillex was on it. And my agent at the time said, hey, do you want to go open for Skrillex on a couple of dates? They pay well, and it could be fun.
And he was like huge. Like
this is like at peak Skrillex, you know? So I did it. And the first night was at this thing called Alita Festival in Milan, which I later found out was run by DJ Tennis.
Yeah.
And it was brutal. Like, I packed a lot of dubstep and stuff, which I like. And I thought I could maybe like try to play original sounding stuff and maybe they'll like it, but they did not like it, and people were booing and throwing stuff, and there was like 5,000 people, and it was a good learning experience for me, but it was crazy. Yeah.
So this was kind of like your first live act too, I guess, right? Or like playing in front of 5,000 people?
I'd played one other show in Toronto opening for this other dubstep act called Zed's Dead. They're kind of like the Canadian Skrillex, I guess.
Yeah.
And that had gone really, really well. But I guess it's just a Canadian vibe. It's a little different. There was about 3,000 people at that show. So I had done it before, but this was the first time being away from like anyone I knew in a European environment. It was crazy.
Yeah. How long did the tour last? Like how long?
It was supposed to be a little longer, but I think I fucked up so bad. I don't even know if we could call it me screwing up, but they weren't happy, so I only ended up doing 2 dates.
Okay. So you didn't like meet like Skrillex and were like longer touring with them?
No, like I met him.
Yeah.
But actually, it's kind of funny. He'd done a post about a week earlier saying his favorite song was Aphex Twin Film.
Yeah.
And all of his fans were like, "Oh, what's this song? This is terrible." Blah blah blah. So I closed my set with that, and at the end of it, he was just like, "Ha ha, good one."
Because he's like, that's what people forget. Of course, like he's like this big person now, but what always stood out to me about him that he really knows a lot about music too, apart from the stuff that he's famous.
I mean, he obviously, like, he's producing all this pop music now, and his reference points are pretty obvious, and he obviously is a very talented guy.
Totally.
But, you know, you get pigeonholed. Like, now I'm the trance guy, even though I don't just do trance. So...
But that was also back then under another name. Yeah. Yeah. So like how like I said, you released your last EP last week, which is like a totally different style. So was it like a more natural flow that your music changed, and then at a certain point you had to think about you change your naming too? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I had an accident while I was living in England,
Yeah.
and then I took 2 years off pretty much
Okay.
from music,
Yeah.
just because headaches and stuff from that. I couldn't really do anything, and
So you didn't play gigs, or you
Didn't.
stopped producing too?
didn't play gigs, and then producing kind of went behind on the back burner, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally came back again, I signed to house music,
Yeah.
and my sound had obviously changed. It was more trance influenced, and I regret not just having changed my name right away then.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think my music really took a big step in 2018 with the Whiteys. And then since then, the Whiteys, ESP, and all the Lucky Me stuff, I think it makes much more sense. And I'm happy I just decided one day to just say, let's start it all with Nathan Micay, and it's worked. And I think I'm very happy with how it's all gone.
Yeah. But you said that you didn't like produce any music like in the 2 years after you had your accident.
I'd made some music, but like it wasn't anything I thought was great.
Yeah.
I mean,
did you listen to a lot of music? Because I just wanted to.
Yeah, I was listening to it. That's when like I started to go from like trance to like electronica, post dubstep, and whatever. And then I discovered trance, and then that really took over my life.
Yeah.
And I still love it, but now obviously my music, there's all kinds of stuff in it now. Yeah.
Yeah. We can talk about your new stuff later, but you also said before that you don't drink, and you're also kind of labeled as the healthy DJ. Also,
Yeah, I mean, I should clarify. Like, I'll have a drink. Like, I'm not like never drink,
Yeah.
but I just don't get really drunk a lot or
Yeah.
anything. I just don't see the point.
But was it always this way, or did you have like a party phase between like 16 and?
Oh,
19?
when I was in high school, I was definitely drinking.
Yeah.
And then when I lived in Israel, I guess I just sort of stopped. And when I got to university, like my first year of university, everyone's drinking and whatever. But I never really enjoyed drinking just because I always had stuff to do. And the next day, if I can't work or do anything, what's the point?
Yeah.
And then it always just seemed like everyone who drank seemed to have a lot more problems than I did in terms of like social interactions that went bad or just drama. And I live a pretty drama-free life, I guess I could say. So
That's a great thing to say in these days where
Yeah.
everything is full of drama.
and any drama I had to talk about this with my friend the other day. Any drama I have had in the past few years has typically involved people who drink a lot and like me getting caught up in that. Like
Yeah.
this year I tried to start drinking again. It was funny. Like my New Year's resolution this year was like to try to enjoy drinking, whereas everyone else was trying to not drink.
Yeah.
And I tried to do it, and I hated it. I hated it so much. And yeah,
But does it make you feel alienated? Because like alcohol is like always seen as the most common sense between people. Like,
Kinda.
to get drunk.
I mean, on the one hand, yes, I'll definitely be DJing, and everyone else seems to be like partying, and I just sort of sit there. Especially when I go out with my friends. Like a lot of my friends call me a daytime friend.
Okay.
But on the other hand, all these festivals or whatever, I'll play at stuff, and then other DJs come up to me saying like, "How do you do it?" And it's not something I don't know what to say. I just like I don't know. It's like you ask a vegetarian like, "How do you not eat a ham sandwich?" It's just like what you enjoy, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just I don't know. I just never really enjoyed the drinking.
Yeah.
I'll still like have a few like party days a couple times a year, you know. I don't have like I'm not like to the point where I have like a set day like March 25th is my party day. But if it seems like something like a great like earlier this year I had 4 of my friends play together at Panorama Bar at once in the garden. It was Peach, Saoirse, Moxie, and Shanti Celeste, and so many of my friends were there, and it was a really great atmosphere. So that day I sort of like had some fun.
Yeah.
And that felt like something worth doing. Also because I could get there at noon, we could all just, hang out in the garden all day, and I was at home by like 11 p.m., you know?
Yeah.
And I felt fine the next day.
But is it also because you also do like a lot of sports? Like,
Yeah, that too. I mean, that's how it really started, I think. When I went to university, I was an arts student,
Yeah.
history major, so I had a lot of spare time, I guess, because you have to do so much reading.
Yeah.
And my school had a really nice gym, and I got really into the gym. And then the more research I did about diet and nutrition, the more I realized that it's hard to balance that with drinking.
Yeah.
So that's when it really stopped for me. And I guess now it's just out of habit. I just don't do it that much.
Yeah. But it's good for you that you don't. I think like it didn't do any good for like people in my circle and for me too. So why should I start?
Some people love it, and it seems to give them a boost in life. But I don't know. What's the point of me working so hard in the gym or on my stuff when the alcohol or whatever might derail it?
Yeah.
Also, I don't ever want to be dependent on something to like be myself.
Yeah. But did the health aspect also came much more into focus after your accident? Like that?
No.
Okay.
I was already not much of a drinker before then.
Yeah.
The only thing that changed with that, I'm still terrible at it, but they told me to start sleeping more, but I still can't do it. So.
Oh, you don't sleep much?
Not much. Not out of choice or anything. It's just I'm always got so much going on that I guess my mind's always racing.
So like creative thoughts or actually doing the
creative or I mean moving to a new country, moving to Germany for the first year, I was like constantly stressing out about weird German forms and all the bureaucracy. I still stress about that sometimes, but yeah, I mean I'm always doing too much. Like now I'm starting a third label and it's just like why? But whatever.
But it's also I think that that's what I can say from me now, that like drinking and partying out is like a great time, but you have less time for other stuff because like as you're getting older you need more and more time to recover and you don't have like the full energy for your other stuff as well.
I don't find that I lose energy because I don't know, I'm not like that for some reason. Even if I go out drinking with friends, like they're all like the next day, and I guess because I sleep so little already, I'm usually pretty good.
Yeah.
It's more just if like I'm going out for like 10 hours, it better be a good fucking 10 hours. I could be working on stuff.
Yeah.
And also I like being alone a lot. I like just time to think and work. Yeah.
So is your time at the gym also like your time out for yourself? Like
sometimes, but also it's nice to work out with people. You can push each other, and like I take a lot of DJs to the gym with me here. They always quit, but they ask to come with me and stuff, so I take them.
Because that's kind of a thing you established too, like you did like a program for other people working in nightlife too.
I've sort of put it, it's gotten smaller because I just gotten busier, but I'm kind of the DJ personal trainer, I guess. But it also makes me think that like DJs or like people living in nightlife become more aware of their health now. Like where in the past it always stood out to me like, oh, they're like kind of the center of the party and like get caught up in drinking and stuff too. Definitely. I mean, we're all getting older, but then also I think the Avicii thing really changed for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then, you see other things like the Jackmaster, and clearly, the guy doesn't want to be the drinking party animal. He says it in interviews all the time, but it still happens. And I think things like this sort of shed light on real issues. And other DJs see it and think that's something I can avoid easily and things like that.
Also because I think there was a documentary probably by, I don't know if it was by Resident Advisor or something like that. I'll put the link in the comments. But which talked about like DJs and their hectic like schedule traveling and like also like the depression part of it, because like from the outside you think, oh, you always like everywhere at the best moment at the peak, but also like all the traveling alone and stuff makes some DJs like feel more lonely and getting depressed, which is something like that haven't been talked about like before.
Yeah, and I mean, if you can work out, it'll raise your endorphin levels. It's a natural serotonin maker. And then also, if you can work out, it's like, why spend time being sat alone in your hotel room when you can go to the parking lot with a skipping rope for an hour,
Yeah.
So it just seems like an easy solution to a lot of problems that people talk about. Like, it's a weird thing to say, but a lot of my friends, we all struggle with mental health stuff, but the first thing I say to all of them is like, do you exercise? And they say, well, no. So I say, well, maybe that's the first place to start. And it's frustrating for me sometimes that so many of my friends, actually a lot of my friends are really starting to try to go for it now. But like you read about so many DJs and like so many mental health problems, and like, yeah, of course I get depressed, everyone does, but it's like such a good first step to like helping that. But why so many people won't do it.
But why do you think that exercising is good for your mental health?
Well, I mean, one, it's a good way to relieve stress. It totally takes your mind off anything that is, bothering you. It's a goal that you can strive for, that you can control. Like, you can put out all the music in the world. It might not catch on, and you might not build a career, but if you work hard in the gym, if your body is, fine, then you can have a real goal to chase, and you can feel better about yourself and what you do. And then, as I said, it's a natural producer of endorphins. So it's like you create your own drug to be happy. there's like, you know, many lists, and you can meet more people like that. And yeah, a lot of my best friends I've met over the years just at the gym, like random people start talking, things like this.
I think people underestimate that like a healthy body is the space for a lot of good stuff happening from there. I can say it for me too. Like I always took like health for granted, and then when I had like a disease, which was I was like ill for like 1 year, and like everything slowed down. I was like, okay, everything sucks now because like my body isn't working the way it used to. So I always try to take care a lot of my body because like for me it starts from there.
Yeah.
Too, and I think people also become like more self-aware like these times of day of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 28 now, and you know, 40's 12 years away, which is a while, but
you're 30 around the corner.
yeah, well, yeah. So it's like, why not prepare as much as you can while your body can take as much as it can take?
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's lots of good reasons to start doing stuff like that.
What's the best exercise for you? Because I guess you're also sitting a lot of the computer, producing stuff too.
I mean, I used to be a bodybuilder, so I used to be like 100 kilo, and
you bulked like really.
And I was just lifting really heavy weights. So back then I would have said just heavy weightlifting. Now I'm all about like speed and endurance and just pushing my body on a few different levels. So I do weights like 3 times a week.
Yeah.
I do a lot of cardio, but like not running. I can't just do that. I have to like 40 seconds with a jump rope, 40 seconds throwing a heavy ball at a wall, 40 seconds of something else, you know?
Yeah. But no running because of your knees, or is it just...
Oh, no, I just get bored. I do a lot of stuff that is like running, but for like short amounts of time at a really high pace. Yeah. But I can't just like run for an hour. I get too bored. Okay. I have to do a bunch of different things.
Oh, that's funny because like back then when I discovered like techno and electronic music, the best thing was like going for a run and like listen to a set of like 40 minutes. Like that's
I do that when I lift weights. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's like really the music. At first, it was just like electronic music for me, the soundtrack of going out and being wasted. But then I also listened to it like while doing sports too, and that's how I got like really into it, like listening to it sober and really feeling it too. Like that's what was always connected for me to sports. Nowadays, of course, I listen to it also too when I'm not running or at the gym too. But that was like my first approach to electronic music because it releases so much good energy.
Yeah.
About it. And also like the part of dancing for like 7-8 hours somewhere is like more like a cardio thing too.
Yeah.
Which always leads me like to the thought that when you're like on the dance floor and you look around the people, it's like a really unhealthy thing to dance that long somewhere. But like a lot of people like in techno culture have like, take care of their bodies too, and which is always like would be like they always have like time to be, I don't know, like 12 hours at a rave, but also like go to the gym too.
I recognize a lot of people at the gym that I see at Berghain, which is funny to me.
Yeah, but they have to because like they have like such good bodies, so they also put a lot of care into that too. But I think for people it's like going extreme in both ways, whereas you say like, you know, your healthy lifestyle always blends into the party thing too. Mm-hmm. Is it hard for you that you don't drink to network like with other people too at the like on a electronic dance music event? Or
no, I mean, as I said, like I don't want something that changes who I am. Mm-hmm. So I'll have a drink in my hand, it'll just be soda water.
Yeah. And
nobody knows any wiser. It just looks like I'm having a gin and tonic. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk to people. I like meeting people. And if I'm drinking, I'm probably going to say something really stupid anyway. So it's at the least I can have a conversation. I actually remember who it is and what they say, and it probably works to my advantage in the long run because I can. If I run into someone at a backstage somewhere or something and they say hello, I'll remember them. Yeah. Whereas if I was drinking all the time, I probably wouldn't. So yeah, networking. I think it's more important I'm just myself and just genuine. If I'm some like party animal, and I'm not a party animal next time, they'll be like, oh, he's boring or something.
Yeah, totally. And what I also recognize to myself too is that the alcohol doesn't like change totally who I am, but like I can be like the funny and talk to everyone person too without having a drink. Like there was always just like a barrier in my head back then where I was like, oh, I need to have like a drink to be more outgoing and everything as a more introvert person. But like the older I got, the more I realized, no, it's already in you. You don't need 2 beers. It's just in your head to release it.
Well, that's it. Like there's no. I remember in high school, like it'd be very much like, how many can you drink? And it's still like a thing that you see. It's just like, oh man, like I'll ask someone how their weekend was, and like, oh man, I drank like half a bottle of this. It was awesome. Like, okay, like was it? You know?
Yeah.
But I'm much more just rather have like a very nice drink if I'm gonna have a drink.
Yeah,
So-
for like because it tastes good, or it's like a part of yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. So you said that you moved like back from Toronto to Berlin. What was the reason behind moving?
Back then I was 24. Yeah. And I just put out some releases that were starting to they were doing very well. And then I got my first offer to play at Panorama Bar in Fabric. And so I said, you know, it was very spontaneous. And I was like, whatever. And so I just moved. And I lived on a guy's couch for like 6 weeks. It's kind of terrifying. And it's all sort of worked out. But I was like, you know, I was 24. I had no money at all. I had to work all these weird jobs under the table. And it was very scary. But yeah, it was probably the most spontaneous thing I've ever done in my life.
Totally. So and it's now already like a few years ago. So it
It was
seems
4
like,
years. It flew by.
Yeah. What's the most different thing between like Toronto and living in Berlin?
No, I mean, Berlin's way cheaper. And it's just slow. Like, in Toronto, if you're an artist or whatever, I always felt like it's very judgy that you're doing that. And it's just like, we'll get a real job or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just so much faster there. Everything is more expensive. And yeah, it's just a much faster city. Berlin's very slow.
It's funny that you say it because I think so too. Like, of course, Berlin has its parts where it's like a lot of fast moving, but it's like so big that you can find your area where you kind of slow down and like do your thing, and it's more accepted that you live like an artistic lifestyle and not do a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have to do it in Toronto just because the prices are so high. But the other thing too is like in Toronto, like a good example is nightlife. Like the clubs all usually close at 2 there.
Yeah.
So it's just like you go to the club, you drink for 2 hours, you leave, and then everyone just like there's chaos in the streets, you know. Whereas here it's just like you go take your time at the club and you do as long as you want, and there seems to be less problems because of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, although I do miss Toronto sometimes, but every time I go back, I recognize it less and less. There's just so much building going on, and the city changes so much every month.
Okay.
Whereas Berlin, it sort of seems like nothing changes here. I mean, obviously there's changing, and they're building, but it's funny when I talk to people who've been here for like 12 years, and like, oh, the city's over, and it's all these new buildings. It's like try living in Toronto, you know? Because my parents, like, I grew up in a neighborhood like this. It's just sort of houses and small apartment buildings, and now I go back and it's huge skyscrapers, like in 10 years.
Yeah.
It's totally crazy.
But I think it's part of the Berlin cultural lifestyle too, to say always like that Berlin is over.
Yeah.
So like that's a joke that's been running for about 20 years. And of course, like nowadays everything happens a little bit more faster, and with more and more people moving here, like they need more space. But still, there's so much undiscovered parts of like the city because like and so much potential here, and people moving here. It's like the number of people living here like. It's going up and up like for every year, and there's like more and more potential coming to the city.
Yeah. I mean, I moved here and I lived in Vetting, and nobody understood why I did that. But I just felt like it'd be cool to live somewhere that's kind of, I mean, it was not undiscovered, but I was the only person I knew living in Vetting.
Yeah.
And I loved it for 2 years. As everyone else I knew lived down here. So yeah, now Vetting's all of a sudden like the cool place. So I'm sure in like a couple of years, maybe Lichtenberg will be the cool place. And right now, nobody wants to be in Lichtenberg. So yeah, it's like the city's huge. Like it's so big.
Totally. And I think also too like that still the nightlife scene is great because there are a lot of new events coming and going always, and it was always part of the charm. For me in Berlin.
I mean, I have no idea what's going on because like I can't really follow it. But like Toronto, there's 2 clubs. One of which is an 80-person club, so like there's for the type of music we like anyway. So and there's more people living in Toronto than there are here. So try to figure that out, you know.
Yeah.
So everyone who says Berlin's over, like I mean, I'm new here. I've only been here for 4 years, but there are cities that have changed a lot quicker in a lot less time.
Totally. You said before that you don't play that live in Germany so far. Like you're only playing Panorama Bar, like when here in Berlin.
Yeah.
Do you know why, or do you?
I don't know.
Do you guess?
I'm starting to get more gigs in Germany outside of Berlin, but for some reason I play a lot in the UK, play a lot in Asia, a lot in the United States, and then various European countries.
Yeah.
But for some reason, Germany, I just haven't really played.
Do you know who discovered you at the Panorama book?
Yeah, it was Andy Baumbecker.
Ah, okay.
Because he used to do the bookings there, and he was the first one. I think we really bonded over a love of like trance and not being afraid to play cheesier things. He's a good guy. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's gonna start changing more and more, but there's parts of Germany I'd love to go to and stuff.
Cool. You also you released your album this year too, and now your EP. What's the difference for you in between making like an EP or an album?
Well, the album, I guess I put a lot of pressure on myself. It's like I'm not the type of person that's just gonna put out an album of songs. So obviously, like, we made the comic book, and I wrote a story, and we made all this artwork. So it had to be a concept. So I had to make like a story with it, which is sort of cheesy to say, but we literally made a story, like we made a book.
Yeah.
So I had to have all that in mind, and the album took about 3 different tries. Like I have 2 finished albums that are just not going to come out.
Okay.
Whereas with an EP, it's just in dance music, it's just DJs. You know, you make it for the DJs to play.
So you said that you need like a story or like an event to be inspired by to make like an album, and not just like a selection of stuff. What was the moment that inspired you to make the album?
I guess just, you know, while I was doing it as well, the world was really starting to get to where we are now with all the crazy people being elected and whatever else, and just reading about parties being canceled and cracked down from governments. And then it made me sort of find the parallels between that and what was happening in England in the early 90s. And then once I started this new batch of tracks, there's this YouTube video called like The Morning After the Rave. It has like 4 million plays. And I was really into the idea of like, okay, what if I did like a futuristic version of A Night to the Castle Morton raves? And that was like the turning point for me. And then it all started to click and make sense very quickly.
Because the Castle Morton raves was an event like at the beginning of the 90s in the UK, and was like an illegal rave, I think.
It was like sort of an illegal festival thing, and it resulted in all these really draconian laws being passed, and a lot of people getting in trouble that they shouldn't have been. And it's still like a thing that people are feeling the effects from in the UK. So I think that was a big turning point when I thought like, okay, what if we like used that as the inspiration?
Totally, which I think is great, because electronic or like techno music has the prejudice of just being like made for the dance floor, but there were always like more or other approaches to like electronic music. Like another album that came out, I think like last year, was by Leon Weinhold, who told like a story too, like Nothing Is Still, and he also made like a book with it. And I really like something that you can like listen to the music but also discover like a whole world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the classic trap of electronic or dance music albums, is that we're so used to making functional music that when you put out an album, nobody has the time or needs a thing of like 11 club tracks. And I think that's why so many of them fail. And then when people start to realize that that's going to fail, they say, well, what if I just get a bunch of vocalists to sing over club tracks so they seem less like club tracks? And then to me, that still doesn't work. So like, you know, like an album like the 2 that really were my benchmarks for like great albums were John Hopkins' Immunity and James Holden, The Inheritors. Because they both feel like there's a start point, there's an end point, and there's a reason to listen to the whole thing. And that's what an album should be. There's a reason to get, like, I'm not going to listen to Dark Side of the Moon. I might listen to one track at a time sometimes, but like there's a reason to go from Breathe to, I forget the name of the final track. But
is it
Eclipse, yeah. And there's a reason to do that, whereas there's so many dance music albums where it's just like, here's 9 bangers. It's like, great, why didn't you just give me 2 EPs? And there's like examples of producers even like I love Fortet, he's a huge hero of mine, but he put out that album I think called Pink a few years ago, which was a collection of tracks from 4 EPs. And I just thought, why? You know? Like, I mean, I get it. It's nice to have them all in a collection. But to me, that still is just 4 really good EPs, you know?
Totally. Which I think that it's more like I would say, old school approach, like to make an album in these times where like a single is everything. But I also loved like a good album too, and I think we're kind of like around the same age. and like still an album for me is like the best way to paint a picture for an musical artist to show like everything and not to be like, yeah, I can make a huge track, but I can like make a whole world to dive in.
I love world building. I mean, that's my favorite shows and books are all about world building.
Yeah.
And I love getting sucked into like a whole project.
Totally. Which are like other albums you mentioned, John Hopkins and Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Are there any other albums that stood out to you, like in the?
Well, I mean, I think Pink Floyd are like the kings of like conceptual albums.
Totally.
I mean, Wish You Were Here, Metal, like they all make perfect sense, and I mean, The Wall's taken it to a level I don't think anyone else has ever taken an album to.
Yeah, I think
the movie and the live show, and it's crazy. But yeah, I don't know. I have to like sit down and think about that. But Pink Floyd are always, in terms of like story building and like outside the box thinking, they're there for me. And they're also thinking about they're doing that in the 70s. Like that's crazy.
Totally. For me, I never dived into Pink Floyd until I was like 2022 because it was like old music for me and I was like more caught up in new stuff. But then when I listened to Dark Side of the Moon for the first time, from beginning to the end, like all the sound and like everything, like the whole experimental approach they took and made it to a whole nother level, and writing good songs, like, and always meeting the thin line between like being a prog band and also having like the best singer out there.
They're incredible, yeah.
Which is a shame that they are not like a band anymore. Those days, but
it's okay. I saw David Gilmour, like the singer guitar player, play in Toronto years ago with Richard Wright, who passed away shortly after. He's the piano player, but it was incredible. I mean, yeah, I can't think of any albums right now, but I mean, even like the first James Holden album, The Idiots Are Winning, that's another good example. He's a guy who can he understands how to put an album together. I mean, Fortet too, like Rounds and There's Love in You, like they make sense as an album. Whereas a lot of albums come out now and it's just like banger club tracks, but I'm not going to make it through the whole album, you know?
Totally. One thing I can recommend, like, just wanted to add to the Dark Side of the Moon, there's a documentary, like, from Arte, I think, about the album, and where they talk about, like, with the engineers and, like, everything for, like, 40 minutes. And there's this moment where he plays the solo from one of the songs, and it's just like magic. Like, the guy is standing there, and it's, like, still doing
I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen that, yeah. That's really good, yeah. There's so much mythology about Pink Floyd. Like, if you ever seen like Live at Pompeii, and they have all the interviews about Syd Barrett and him coming to the studio, and just so many stories and weird. Like, you want to find like the source of like the guy talking at the beginning of Money and stuff like that, and it's such a journey. I love it.
Totally, yeah. No, it's great, and I also see that you're wearing like a Mobb Deep long sleeve. Are you into hip hop too?
Yeah, I was a huge hip hop head when I was younger. I couldn't tell you what's going on right now, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I still listen to a lot of like the older stuff I like. This shirt, my friend Dai made this for me. He makes shirts in Tokyo under the name Docs. And he knows I like Mobb Deep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still listen to that. Like on the album, I tried to sort of bring some of that influence in as well. But I couldn't tell you what's going on right now.
Yeah. No, but I have to say too, like, there's the joke between a good friend and of mine, but I always say that The Infamous is my most favorite hip-hop album of all time, which has been with me for like the past 15 years or even longer. And I still, when I listen to it and I just listen to the sound of the snare, I'm be like, yeah, that's still my favorite album to this day.
Yeah.
It paints like the whole bleak picture of New York in the mid 90s.
Yeah, I'm getting into a lot of that stuff again recently. Like, every summer I seem to go back to Souls of Mischief, 93 to Infinity, and it's like my song for 3 months, and then winter comes and it goes away again.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also like electronic music. It's like one of those things where like, you can hear a techno track and you can hear the kick drum and be like, oh, I know what it's going to be. And it's the same thing with like a snare and hip hop. Yeah, I love things like that.
Cool. I read in an interview that you always make a list to achieve things and to have it on your mind. What's next on your list?
Well, I'm starting a reissue label right now, and then I'm also starting an originals label. So I already have Schwitz edits for all the edits I make, and I'm doing Eternal Schwitz, and that'll be for all the reissues, and then original Schwitz. So I'm setting up this like trifecta, I guess. So that's on my mind. Also thinking about the next album maybe for who knows when. But I'm mostly with the next thing is like trying to. Seems like there's a lot of energy right now. different labels starting, different releases doing well, and traveling more and more. I'm trying to figure out a way to sort of get used to all that and direct that energy in a good way. And yeah, before it was more like, what label do I want to be on and things like that. And I feel like I'm sort of achieved those goals. And now it's more about how to create all this into a way that's sort of sustainable. Because there's so many different things going on and it's hard to sort of keep track. So my lists are more like, they're less lists now and more just directories of what's going on and how to connect everything.
Cool. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it because like I'm a huge fan of the album and didn't have time enough to listen to the EP just once. But I'm also very looking forward to your new stuff and
Thanks a lot.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.